Right, good morning. Welcome to the Scrutiny meeting this morning for Education and Children's Services. We're going through their end of year reports, and Councillor William J. Rebley, I'll be your chairman this morning. Just a little bit of housekeeping, which I always do, because I'm just like that. This Scrutiny Committee meeting is being live streamed on a hybrid basis in accordance with Government and Election Wales Act 2021, which operates alongside the Council Standing Orders. The Council Standing Orders and Code of Conduct will apply at all times, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Absolutely. A recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request, and the images and sound recordings may be used for training purposes within the council. Thank you. Right, good morning again. We're going to do any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillors Davis, Tim and Townsend.
Yeah.
And also, sorry Chair, Councillor Watkins and also Councillor Harvey.
Okay,
thank you.
Any declarations of interest? Minutes of the last meeting on pages 3 to 4. Do we have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'm happy to move that, Chair.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Some of the members are having problems with delays, camera issues, a whole host of things. And so if we have this delay, it's not our fault. You know. Okay, end of service reports are those on page 5 to 72. We're going to go with education first, as you're all at the table. It makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, that's Councillor Patel this for the introduction. Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to say a few words this morning. I think all of us in this room are here for the same reason, is that we care passionately about our children in the airport. We all, I think, believe that we need to make a difference in their lives. We need to give them every opportunity to raise their aspiration and access, not just education, but opportunities post-education. And that truly matters. So I'm really proud in regards to what we deliver in our schools. And the most important focus is our children actually attend schools. So I'm really proud of the fact that our attendance figures sustain themselves at the best in Wales. We've had a huge drive on reducing long-term absenteeism. We've got a huge drive in, we have a focus on the right for every child to access education, which means that we've got the lowest level of home exclusions in the whole of Wales, because we truly focus on strong behaviour strategies across all our schools, and that focus on supporting our children's education. Exclusion is always the last thing we actually consider having to do. And if a child has to be excluded, it does not mean they're left behind. They're always placed in another form of education, whether it's within another school or a form of education, whether it's in alternative provision. All of those are managed at the highest possible standards, which means that Estin last year gave us the highest level of praise. We focus on ensuring our children have access to education, and that means all children, which is why this year we launched our poverty strategy. All of our schools, 100% of them, are completely focused on delivering community-focused initiatives to ensure that parents and children all engage with schools, and we're reaching out to ensure the schools are used as alternative provisions outside school hours. I'm really proud of specific issues and developments going on within our school environment at the moment. Pontygamlis is about to be launched as our new school in Wales, in Newport, within the Betty's estate, as Millbrook and Monroe Primary amalgamate Crindle Primary has had issues, but I'm so grateful to School Home Life and Friendly for their support, as well as Middlebrook Primary, ensure those children still have absolute appropriate provision and learning is ongoing. I'm really proud of what we have to offer, and I think most of what we do is focused on and is delivered from our teachers, our teaching assistants, and of course our education team. We clearly wouldn't do that without the, still getting used to the new name, the LACES, who have focused and helped us strengthen self-evaluation, which helps to strengthen leadership within our schools. So loads of positives to report on today, an excellent report, and I hope you can ask us some really good questions that we can use effective answers to. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to take us through the report.
Shall I answer questions, Chair?
No, do you want to take us through the report
Yeah,
first, and then we'll go back to answering questions?
So what you'll see in the report is that there are a number of overarching objectives. Five objectives. The first linked to school improvement, the second linked to engagement, learning and wellbeing, the third linked to inclusion and additional learning needs, fourth to resources and planning and capital works, and objective 5 is around leadership and management. When you look at the entire report, naturally everything is based on our own self-evaluation processes, where we've prioritised work that is based on areas that need to develop. So this is not just a service plan, an end of year plan, this is an improvement plan for the area to make sure that we're consistently improving, both in schools and within the corporate domain. All of the objectives have been met this year and all of the actions have been complete. This hasn't happened by accident. Within education services, there are 11 teams that have each got individual team plans, where they look at those plans throughout the year and making sure they're on target. And if they need to adapt during the year, they certainly do, based on the here and now. So we're always looking at the wider intelligence within the system. We've gone through challenges in terms of our budget, as all council services will across Wales, but I'm pleased to report that we've come out with £1,000 underspent. So I would say that's on target, considering the size of the budget. We've been really careful with the money that we've been provided with by the council. Some good examples of that budget expenditure is that we're really focused on reducing the number of out-of-county places within education services to make sure that, because we know, number one, they're very expensive for our pupils, and we know that it's important for all of our pupils within the city to be educated within the city, very close to their communities. So what you'll note from the budget is there's a £941,000 underspend in out-of-county, but that was reinvested into local provision, where we were getting better value for money, and we could support a higher volume of children and young people to support their complex needs. So whilst it might look as if there was no overspend in local provision, it was offset by the out-of-county, as I said, to acquire better value for money. Going back to some of the really strong highlights for this year is Estin had a frequent commentary around they were noticing that Welsh language was not where it should be in report schools, and we spent a long time working on professional development with our schools, and they were supporting us with developing Welsh oracy for our pupils. It's a natural starting point to work on Welsh oracy before you start then to work on writing, because unless you've acquired your oracy skills, you can't go on to the writing skills with any sustainability or depth. And we've made sure that we've evaluated through a range of schools and sampled first-hand evidence in people's books, through lesson observations and through other evidence bases, and we've got an indication that the Welsh language oracy has been highly successful in what we've done. So it's a really strong evaluation. The other exciting part of that as well is we haven't seen Welsh oracy come up as a recommendation in any of the schools that we visited by Estin. So there's a strong evidence base for improvement. This year we've focused in their interview report. You'll see that we've acquired additional LRB places to support our ALN pupils at primary school level. We opened our first Welsh language resource base for pupils in Ysgol Gymraeg Wembley, and that is flourishing. The second expansion was in Cofnodion Primary School, and of course you'll know that that new building was officially opened during this academic year, and the new building space allowed that learning resource-based expansion. Although this goes on beyond this end of year report, in summer term we also opened a learning resource space at Tredegar Park Primary and in Maesglas Primary. So we're thrilled again that children can have provision in their local communities rather than taking extensively long journeys out and about. The risks within education services still remain around things such as school costs, school finance pressures. But I'm pleased to report that the number of schools in deficit are quite minimal, especially if you look at that through the national platform. So in Newport, at the end of the financial year, only 2 schools were in deficit, which is very, very low, and we continue to support those schools to get out of deficit quickly with our deficit recovery team. And Deborah, who is our Assistant Head of Education and Resource and Planning, heads that team with finance as well. And we're able to come up with practical solutions where schools may be able to save some money, or we can help them in other ways. But it's been a highly successful year. None of our risks have gone past an amber status. They're managed and mitigated within the service area. And some of our risks have reduced in their scores and in their status. And we feel that they are manageable, as I said. But it's been a very, very successful year. We'll see that our workforce planning has been again completed, where we focus on ensuring that we've got enough school improvement partners and the head teachers in Newport who've got those expertise to support other schools. They've been working with us to make sure that we've got a consistent approach to supporting school development planning and self-evaluation, so the messages are really clear. We've had a specific focus on education services in upskilling ourselves in digital skills to make sure that we can work as efficiently as possible, and that's been highly successful as well. I'm also pleased to report that we've managed to ensure that all of our medium-term financial pressures that were planned for last year have been met. And so there are no outstanding actions that are causing us a problem for corporate services.
Thank you, Sarah. We're going to open up the full report now to members. Do we have any questions upon Councillor Cleverly?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say an excellent report, interview report, focusing on ALN. Estin are really positive in their reports on all the schools, and also the attendance in schools is well, you know, not many schools are well below the average attendance. And I really like the case studies. The autism bus was absolutely amazing. And it should be more of that, I think, to, you know, for people to be educated in the autism, because not many people know all about it. Oh, the only thing I was going to mention, in the case studies, most of all the school consultations, most of the schools said the one bad thing about the new schools, etc., was the school drop-offs and pickups. Now, this seems to be a problem in every school in Newport, and I know that you can't solve that on the roads and wherever, but hopefully when we build these new schools, there is room for car parking, etc., for not only for the teachers and the staff, but, you know, for when parents arrive, because as you know, they just park in the middle of the road, you know, and I don't know what we can do about that. We've had yellow lines and the parking enforcement team, and nothing seems to be working against the parents. So that's the only negative thing I had to say, Chair. Thank you very much. And well done to all your team, Sarah. Doing an excellent job.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So my question just relates to one of the risks I believe that was noted in relation to condition of buildings, especially of the school sites. It's just relation, how confident are we on the condition and the lifetime left on buildings? Because we've seen some issues, obviously in the past, that has had to have an increased budget, if you will, in emergency repairs. So it's just about where we are looking at both the risk, but also the financial risk behind that, and whether or not we're well resourced behind that, and is there anything else that needs to be done in order to make sure, you know, is there anything that's added into budgets to watch out for in the future? Thank you.
Hi, Councillor Marshall. Obviously, yes, you are right that we have unfortunately had some instances with being forced to close school buildings. We continue to work alongside our colleagues in Custom Cymru, who undertake a programme of building surveys across the estate to identify any critical risks that need to be addressed. Unfortunately, the age of the estate means that we are looking at what needs to be done to assure us of business continuity arrangements, but we work alongside Custom Cymru in that respect. The Council's capital maintenance annual sum, most colleagues in this room and in fact across the council will recognise that education gets the majority of that annual sum in terms of what's necessary to keep buildings fit for the purpose and safe for children to use. We are particularly focused around roofs, boilers and windows, okay, because we need to keep the building airtight and warm and you know, free of any rain. So that's what we're particularly focused on. We are confident with the information that Custom Cymru provide us with. We've also been able to benefit in recent years in specific capital maintenance grant funding from Welsh Government, which again, we prioritise work in the same way, using the experts at Custom Cymru to identify those business critical issues that make sure that we can keep those buildings as safe as possible. Unfortunately, some issues do arise that are unexpected. The Crinder situation this year was one of those. We are undertaking those repair works so that the children at Crinder can return to the building as soon as possible. And we have, as a result of the issue in Crinder, undertaken specific inspections at other schools that were built at the same time, just to ensure that the same problem isn't replicated. But we are confident that is not the case. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Rhys, on that?
I think we've probably spoken about it here previously. So there was an uplift in that capital maintenance budget in the last budget. I think about 86% of that maintenance budget goes on the school estate. It is the biggest part of our estate, you know, that's focused on, you know, ensuring that we keep the buildings open in a safe way. The Sustainable Communities for School Rolling Programme, other local authorities have been able to utilise that funding to actually, you know, remove bits of their ageing estate and build new schools, because they're falling school roles. We're not in that position. I think as Deb was saying, report on PC yesterday, Newport is the only local authority in Wales with a planned pupil increase over the next 20 years. So essentially, we're using that to increase the school estate rather than take the opportunity to remove ageing estate and build new schools. Obviously, Millbrook is on the GAMLIS is an example of, actually being able to replace a school with a new build, and we'll continue to do that. It's a challenge. We've got a really proactive approach to assessing what the risks are within schools and trying to get ahead of them.
No, fair. Thank you all. And the words covenant in there was definitely appraised in there, and I understand. And hopefully it does reassure us as councillors on the committee that obviously all the work that can be done is being done, and to try where possible avoid any issues like we've seen over the past 12 months. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the first thing I want to say is just well done, because it's such a positive report. So I just wanted to say congratulations to everyone involved, the council officers and particularly the school staff. I think, because we all know how much pressure they work under, and the amount of dedication they show. So yeah, well done to everyone. That's the first thing. In terms of questions, I just wanted to ask a quick question about, there's a point on page 10 of the report, page 21 of our packs, about prejudice-based bullying. And I'm assuming that refers to bullying based on protected characteristics. And I'm just wondering about any policies that you might have in terms of bullying in general. And I suppose you could argue that all bullying is based in some way on some form of prejudice. But I was just wondering whether you've got any comments about more sort of generalised bullying that maybe isn't based on protected characteristics. What evidence have you got to say that how much bullying is based on prejudice as opposed to non-prejudice? If that sort of makes sense.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor. So we have, as noted in the report, we have strong anti-bullying policies and wellbeing action plans in place with all of our schools. So within my portfolio area, we have a health and wellbeing team of 2 part-time teacher advisors who support schools directly in this area of their work in promoting anti-bullying. In the last year, which this report covers, we've offered every school professional learning, and that's in partnership with Bullies Out, who you might know of. They're a national organisation. We've also revised and improved the mechanism by which we collect and gather data on bullying incidents and one-off incidents of discrimination which are experienced in schools. The Welsh Government has very recently revised the statutory guidance around this area of work. So the Rights, Respect, Equalities guidance was just published this summer term in its most recent form. And schools, all the schools in Newport have a current anti-bullying policy which adheres to that guidance. Whilst our mechanisms for gathering data on bullying do offer schools the opportunity to categorise those incidents against those protected characteristics, as you described, there are broader categories which include other aspects where we see patterns and trends in bullying. For example, appearance would be one which isn't specifically linked to one of those identified protected characteristics. What we can report is that all schools engage with that statutory reporting mechanism, and we monitor those reports on a termly basis, and we write a cabinet member briefing paper on an annual basis, and we have evidence that shows that bullying levels in Newport schools are not causing concern, and they're certainly not increasing. And some of our specific targeted projects are having a good impact. So, for example, our anti-racism strategy is having a really positive impact.
All right, thanks. That's really good to hear. I mean, as councillors, the vast majority, if not all of us, we're governors in schools. So I think we're in a slightly privileged position of we're aware of the anti-bullying policies, which is great. But I think sometimes in a public forum like this, it's really good for people to hear what you just said out loud. So yeah, thanks for that. That is quite reassuring. Chair, do you want me to ask all my questions sort of one at a time, or are we going to go via themes?
Ask them all. Go for it.
Okay then, right. I will go on to the next one. Thank you. My next question is to do with some of the exclusion figures that are mentioned. I mean, first of all, I'm speaking now as an ex-teacher, I suppose, thinking about how exclusions affected me when I used to be in the classroom. The targets that we got for exclusions, how would you say those targets balance? Obviously, the need to keep people in school, that's an obvious need. We need to try and keep as many people in school for as long as possible for their own benefit, but then balancing that with the needs and the safety of the staff and the majority of pupils who do follow the expected norms of behaviour. There may be a concern sometimes that the need to drive down exclusion figures might be at the expense of the pupils who are following the rules and the staff who are doing their best to keep control in the classroom.
Okay, so Reynolds, just to give you an overarching headline, I'm going to pass over to Katie, who's a senior ALN advisor, but we do look at all types of intelligence around this. So it is absolutely the children are the centre of everything and making sure that they have the education to. But we also have to consider staff well-being, and we also have to make sure that we're taking a 360-degree rounded view of disruption to other pupils. That's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so a good example is that we track staff well-being and any violence at work forms that come through, and making sure that we're looking at those as well. And if there is any information that's coming through where staff needs and schools need specific support around issues that might link to pupil behaviour. So we look at all of that evidence base. So it's not, we don't just set targets at the expense, I suppose, of everybody, but we do prioritise the education for the child naturally and their well-being as well. But there are other people involved. But Katie, I'm going to pass over to you because there are lots and lots of different options that are available to schools for support, including having support from our other colleagues in children's services where they support us with youth justice. And their support corporately is incredible. So,
yeah. Sorry, you can't actually see me on the screen. I'm trying to move forward a little bit. Yeah,
I can see your elbow if that helps.
Research has told us that the longer you have exclusions, so if you have exclusions for 5 days or more, you tend to lose those pupils. They're out on the streets, they're not necessarily at home. We've got a lot of criminal exploitation within the city that we're trying to manage with our young people. So we work really hard with our schools to understand the effects of long-term exclusions on our young people. There are reasons why some pupils are excluded. But it's about holistic support to change the behaviours they're presenting. And if you put long exclusions in, you actually lose those pupils. So by having shorter exclusions with holistic wraparound support for those young people, you're more likely to support and change their behaviours rather than their behaviours continuing. So we've done a huge piece of work, and I believe some of the councillors have seen the harmful behaviours guidance as well, which is looking at additional support from police teams, the Youth Justice Service, a wraparound support and third sector for some young people who've got exclusions in relation to harmful behaviours to try to address and understand what's the cause of their behaviour, but to actually put some learning in place to change those behaviours going forward. So there's always, if an exclusion is in place, we've worked with our schools to try to understand the behaviours, but actually put some things in place to change those behaviours happening again. So there's been a huge piece of work developing pastoral support plans, individual learning plans related to behaviour and to reducing that risk, but also that multi-agency support around. We've also, as part of the expansion of our specialist service in Newport, we've expanded our outreach service from the Bridge Achievement Centre as well, so to have intensive support for some of our young people through that. We've also got our inclusion advisory team that does some bespoke work with some of these pupils as well. But what we've seen over the years, we had a huge push on trying to reduce those over 5 days exclusions, which work really well with our schools. So we've got those down now almost to half a day at the maximum, but then that wraparound support is put in almost immediately. And for some of those young people who are involved in harmful behaviours, there's multi-agency safety support plans that are put in place. So it's not a case of there's an exclusion, you're back to school. It's about school, parents and other agencies working collectively to change those behaviours, to really understand them. And that's what I think we've worked really hard over the last 5 to 8 years, to be honest, is looking at that wider perspective, that multi-agency join-up and that recognition of we don't want to lose our pupils. So nationally, we've reduced those over 5 days exclusions. We're still working on the 5 days and less, but if you look at the data individually, they're half days, a days at most. And if we have young people that are permanently exclusioned, and although our Welsh national data is showing we're the lowest in Wales for permanent exclusions, we have got robust systems in place to support those children who are permanently excluded because they are Newport's children. It's not a case of moving them out of one school and that's it, the problem solved for that school. It's about looking at how we can to educate that young person into a better way and to find the best education pathway for them to make sure we don't lose them. Because at the end of the day, we want lifelong learning and those young people to be informed adults within Newport. So I understand what you're saying about exclusions being detrimental to other pupils within the class as well with the behaviours, but it's about that wraparound support and changing those behaviours for those young people and where necessary supporting them on a different education pathway if there's that need. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, thank you very much. I've got to be honest, that is such a reassuring answer. It really is. Especially hearing you talk about the multi-agency approaches and the preventative work. You're looking at the reasons behind the behaviour because, I've said this in other forums as well. It's not just the behaviours that we're looking at, it's the reasons behind it, the causes of behaviour, and doing the preventative work behind that to avoid it happening in the first place. So yeah, that is a really reassuring answer. Thank you. Could I just ask one more question, Chair? Still to do with exclusions and figures, is to do with the targets and how those targets are actually arrived at in the first place. Just wondering whether you can give me a little bit more detail on that. I'll give you an example. On page 29 of the report, I'm not sure what page of the education report it is, page 18, there's a table of various targets. I'll just give you one as an example. The number of fixed term exclusions of 5 days or less per 1,000 pupils. It's in the green. It's fine. The actual target is 63.2 per 1,000 pupils, which seems a very, very, not random. Obviously, it's not random. I'm sure you come to that using some sort of formula. But it's a very specific number, 63.2 pupils per 1,000. And the actual figure is just over 60, so we're inside that. But would you be able to give me some idea how you come to those figures in the first place?
We look at our target setting within our service area. We use a set of guiding principles. So first of all, when you see those the per 1,000 people figures, that's the way that Welsh Government report their exclusions. We're staying in line with their reporting or data captures. Gives us something to be able to give a suitable context and comparison to. But the types of principles we use are, number one, where do we come in terms of the quartile positions? So if we previously come in quartile 3, we're always seeking improvement. We want to set a target which was in the second quarter. Okay, for us, we generally are in quarter 1 or quarter 2, above the Welsh average. And so we're trying to improve our position. We're ambitious for the city of Newport and for schools themselves. We always want to improve from last year's position. So even if we are in quartile 1 presently, we would want to improve the position. So we do try to go for something which is better. Okay, but we don't just set those targets as well. Separate from schools. So when you see exclusion targets, particularly in secondary schools, our teacher advisor for behaviour will go and visit every head teacher and chair of governors, and they will drill down to school level, looking at their previous data. So because you can imagine, can't you, with 9 secondary schools, for instance, when you aggregate the data up, it can look okay. can look really satisfying, but when you drill down to individuals, you could have some schools that are perhaps have got higher exclusions than you would hope for, and there's room to improve there as well. So those targets are set collaboratively with lots of those thoughts in mind about improving positions, about acquiring more professional development and skills and multi-agency support to make us better the situation. And actually, we go further than that. When we set attendance targets, they're done in conjunction with exclusion targets. So what you'll often find is the senior education welfare officer, the teacher advised for behaviour, will meet with the chair of governors and the head teacher to make sure all of these targets are aligned, because exclusions will affect attendance in a detrimental fashion. So nothing happens by accident. There is a methodology behind it that we try and follow. It's difficult when you're in first position for something, but we always want to get better, or at least maintain our really high performance.
That's great, thanks, sir. You've actually answered my follow-up question, which was going to be about how challenging those targets might be, but you've answered that perfectly. So thank you. I did have one other question, Chair, it's to do with ALN transport, but I think you might be asking something about that later on, so I'll hold off for now. Thanks very much.
Okay. Councillor Jenkins.
Morning. Apologies, my camera isn't working. My question's on additional learning needs. Demand for ALN provision continues to increase. How confident are we that in the future demand can be met? And also, how long are families waiting for assessment or support, please?
Hello, Councillor Jenkins. I'm just in the corner again. See my hand.
That's okay.
Yeah, with ALN needs, with the change of the ALN statutory duties, it's the school's responsibility to identify if a pupil has additional learning needs and to look at placing a school-based IDP. So there's a set process and time frame for schools. If then the school decides that the provision that the pupil requires is above and beyond what the school is able to provide, then they can escalate at the local authority's ALN panel, and then we review the case to look at whether a specialist placement is required. So there's a step process for the local authority as well, and we keep within our time frames of that process. As Sarah mentioned earlier, in the last year we've actually expanded our LRB placements in addition to those that were already planned because of the increased need that we are seeing coming through the system. So we put in place the additional provision at Adroddiadau Park, which opened on 1st of April, and the Mice Glass provision will open on the 1st of September this year. And that we did have a waiting list of placements this academic year, but all of those placements now, those on the waiting list, have now got places for September, either in the Adroddiadau Park placement or the Mice Glass. In the interim as well, we employed a member of staff to support any pupil that is on the LRB waiting list or transitioning into the LRBs. And that's worked really, really well because they've been able to work with parents, work with the school, understand the needs of that young person and support the transition effectively into a specialist provision. So there's a lot of work that goes on to that. What we also do as well is review our data analysis trends of the ALN growth, our population growth, and also looking at the needs, how many school IDPs, for example, that we've got within our schools and our projections going forward. We also work really closely because we've got an early years team that sit under my portfolio, and we work really hard at early identification of need, and then that feeds into our projections as well of our specialist provision need. We know there's need for further growth in the future, and that is something we're continually considering and planning. So as soon as progress is made on those areas, but as I said, this past year we've exceeded our growth in specialist provision because we've also grown the Bridge Achievement Centre, and further growth is expected next year with that provision for children with behaviour or emotional wellbeing needs. So there's been significant specialist growth, but as a city we don't sit on our laurels, and we're continually reviewing the data and looking at what else we need to meet people's needs, because ultimately, as Sarah said at the start, we're really conscious we do not want to increase out-of-county figures. We want to reduce them and keep our young people in local provision closest to home where possible. So there's still a lot of work that we're working on in the background, but we've made significant improvements in the last year with the expansion of our specialist provisions. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. So is it, so I know you've answered my question, but have you got an approximate time that people are on the list?
Well, we try to reduce the list as soon as possible. So, for example, that's why we ended up opening the Tredegar Park, to reduce the waiting list significantly. We had 16 pupils on the waiting list towards the end of December. So we opened over the spring term, planned to open that additional provision for the 1st of April and the 1st of September. So we worked quickly, but we did, it's the first time that we've had a waiting list. So we don't want that again, hence our growth of my class as well, and then looking to see if further expansions are required in the future. But it's basically a term to 2 terms waiting, but we're trying to put the support in place for those young people who are waiting to transfer to their specialist long-term placement.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. It's on a slightly different theme with NEETs. I don't know if you want to come in because you had a question on ALN as well, haven't you?
You go first. It's okay.
No, that's great. Thank you, Chair. So question is, basically, we're just given the funding differences with post-16 education. How confident are we in making sure that we don't lose the track, if you will, in relation to those post-16 needs, and being able to track them, making sure they're supported, but also what we're doing with partners like Careers Wales and other agencies to make sure that we're doing the best that we can still do, be it with governmental changes at a Welsh level. Thank you.
I will pass over to Becky, who's the expert in the needs areas, Councillor Marshall, but one thing I would just like to point out is, whilst we're holding a performance indicator for post-16 need measures, it is beyond just the council's responsibility. Obviously, we're looking at Gwent as a provider and lots of different providers. So the ability for us to track is heavily dependent with Careers Wales still. And I can tell you that we track our own schools really, really well, and that we're able to, we've got our finger on the pulse with that data. It does become very difficult when you've got lots of partners sat around the table. However, Becky has headed a youth support service board, which is focused on tracking young people to prevent them from becoming NEET, and many of those partners are sat around the table, and we are coming up with a constructive solution to be able to track. But it becomes more difficult. That's an important point. But Becky, I'll pass to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Marshall. And members will recall that at, I think it was the last scrutiny session, or perhaps the one before, we had a focused agenda item on NEETs and the performance of destinations of pupils in Newport, and you had a full report on this area. Sarah's described the Youth Support Services Board. So that group is a governance group which sits across all of our monitoring and tracking mechanisms and reviews through meetings on a monthly basis. That board reviews the proportion of learners specifically focused on year 11, 12 and 13, because those are our performance measures. We look at those learners who might be at risk of not securing a sustained destination once they leave their current education placement. And we work at quite a forensic level, so we report monthly to the board the tracking data that we receive from our schools. As a board, we problem solve and we look at common challenges, and we collaborate with Preventions and Inclusion, the Youth Service, our training providers locally, Gwent and Careers Wales, to look at innovative ways to secure pupils' engagement and to make sure young people are well skilled and ready to move towards a destination. So, for example, we've used some grant funding to secure some high impact summer training courses, which are described briefly in the report for those identified young people. What I will remind members that we talked about when we did the full needs report is that the reduced funding to training provider places in our region is a significant challenge. So you've heard about Newport growing and our pupil population in schools growing, and particularly in year 11, as I reported previously, and at the same time, training provider places are having decreased funding. So it's more difficult for pupils who would like a vocational pathway, or pupils who are leaving school with fewer qualifications and qualifications at a lower level. It's more difficult for them to get a place at college at an entry level or at a training provider. Entry requirements are increasing, places are more in demand, there are less places and more pupils wanting those places. So when we meet with the Youth Support Services Board, we look in detail at all of the courses that Coleg Gwent are offering, how many are full, how many have waiting lists. We meet with our schools on a half-termly basis. We ask Coleg Gwent, we go through every individual pupil's name. We ask them to confirm where exactly is that pupil in your applications process. Have they been offered a place? Have they clicked the accept button? Have they attended your keeping in touch meeting? Do we need to offer any individualised support for that pupil? Do we need to target a conversation with that pupil on results day when they get their GCSE outcomes, for example? So it's absolutely at a forensic level and it's done very frequently. But for us, training provider funding is certainly a risk in terms of needs.
That's great, thank you. And just to note, obviously, that's within scope, obviously, what you've advised, and we have had a meeting, as you noted, that's covered some of the areas in the last 12 months that this report covers. If the Chair will allow, is there any kind of vision or view of any challenges that we may experience other than those noted within the next 12 months? Are we going to see any further challenges when you come back to visit us and explore this report, just to make us aware, and if there's anything that we could maybe, recommend, suggest, etc. from that?
You might recall in my previous report, Councillor, that we are focusing in the new service plan from April 2026 onwards, particularly on our year 13s, because their outcomes in the last census release were aligned to the Welsh average, but not performing quite as strongly compared with other local authorities, which we are doing in year 11 and year 12. The census date, the actual data is collected and published by Careers Wales, so it's not actually data owned by education. So the current cohort of pupils in year 11, 12 and 13, those who are in the academic year 25-26 cohort, the census date for their destinations measure is the 31st of October 2026. And while Careers Wales will give us a broad indication of pre-release data, we won't get the published verified data until April 2027. So it'll really be in the spring next year that we'll be able to come back with a little bit more finer detail for you on this current cohort.
That's great, thank you. And also any challenges within year, if you would let us know as well, and if there's anything that we could do to suggest or recommend, it would be gratefully appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Any further questions on that? No? Okay. Just for noting on that, and I'll move on to a couple of questions. The trajectory for these is going up, so we're missing our targets there. We don't have to answer this now, but just to tell you, we will be keeping a very close eye on this, and hopefully we'll see an improvement here, but the committee will keep an eye on this going forward. And thank you for your answers. A bit of a conundrum here, and I just hope you'll be able to explain it to me. The education, so we're on page 37 or 25, depending on which number you go by. So page 37, service area budget variance. So understand, as you've explained, there was a £1,000 overall underspend. Great. Overspend areas. Bridge Achievement Centre, increasing transport costs, 146k. Staffing costs, 213k. 53k premises cost, and 72k supply and services, 504k agency on contractor services and parties, and LPD and the grant, 500k. Now, I understand when we go down, but how are we overspending there, and are we underspending elsewhere? And is the elsewhere subsidising the overspend?
Okay, so what I can tell you, Chair, is the first point about the Bridge Achievement Centre. So it was overspending, wasn't it? And if you remember, going back to the council's, the full council earlier in the year, the medium-term financial plan for the council said there would be a £500,000 investment into the Bridge Achievement Centre. What we're confident of is because that permanent investment has been made and we've overspent by 489 in the previous year, that should be put right. Okay, so that won't be a future overspend because we know that there is fragility with the Bridge Achievement Centre in the sense that children can be so highly complex. There are occasions when a child needs more than one adult to one pupil ratio. It can be as much as 3. Okay, so that comes with and that's specifically been spoken to an individual child, but that has been put right, and it's because the intelligence of my individual service area budget has been discussed with exec boards, has been reported to the cabinet members, cabinet leader, etc., and the investment has been made. So, would you like me to go on?
Yes, please.
When I look at the ALN Global Provision Development Specialist budget, we were very much aware that we were overspending. We were investing there in order to get the outcome of the underspend or out-of-county spend. Now, this is forensically looked at, by the way. So what we're looking at is, first of all, this is involved in our risk-based monitoring. So we've got fragility in the budget, or there is high spend, we put it into a risk area focus. I'm looking at, for instance, the trajectory and the trend of the amount of pupils coming back from out of county or not going to out of county, so that I know how much we can invest in ALN provision, so that the two costs are paid, so that I'm not at risk of overspending in the service area. If I'm not saving out of county and I'm investing in local provision, I've got a responsibility on me to make sure that I come to a balanced position. So I'm looking at individual figures, cost per pupil. I'm looking at that on a monthly basis to make sure that that is financially sound. If I felt that I was going to overspend and I needed to further invest in local provision, and it was going to be overspent, I would have to be corporately responsible enough to take that to our executive boards, with the chief executive and our strategic directors, to make sure they were aware of those risks. But that paid up quite nicely in terms of value for money, and that was just managed within the head of service and our finance business partner. With school meal repairs and maintenance, I knew again that the trajectory of the grant spend coming in to the council was offsetting the additional spend. If I felt that it was a risk, I would have had to report that up, and I didn't feel that it was necessary because it was manageable. When you look at special home to school and ALN transport, you'll notice we were 341k spent. We knew that was happening. We were keeping an eye on that every single month. Actually, that's 7% of the total budget, which feels right to come in and around that area and spent. We knew that individual contracts has risks associated with them because of the war, and we knew that there was petrol. Perceived inflationary costs which didn't come to light. We also knew that local provision development was meaning that pupils were not travelling in taxis out of county. We knew that our local learning resource bases that were happening in Leeds Glass, in Nant Gwentley, in Hill, for instance, were reducing the costs of taxis for pupils, for instance, there. So that 341k is down to those contextual factors, but we were keeping a close eye on them. We were looking at the per pupil costs on a monthly basis. So the sharp eye enabled us to be able to have a handle on it and to be able to give a story behind every underspend and every overspend. But it was important that we gave confidence to our senior colleagues that we were not going to overspend.
Thank you. I don't see any other hand up. I guess committee are now satisfied to move on to the next report. And that's exactly what we're going to do. What we're going to do is suspend the live recording, have a changeover because we got a lot of stuff to change over. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Well, properly then. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, right. Good afternoon, welcome back. We only paused the live event so we have a changeover of team. Now we have the Children's Services end of year report, and we're going to let the officers take us through this to begin with.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rightly. So first of all, I think the report evidences good progress this year. However, there's still significant pressures, primarily linked to children's placements. We have been focusing on reducing the number of children in care where safe to do so, and also improving the support that we provide our children in care and also our care leavers. We have been increasing our local placements, as you'll see within the report. We've been strengthening our safeguarding and also modernising our systems. So the key strengths include fewer children looked after than in previous years. So you will note that in 2022 we had 388, as around 2024-25 we've been averaging around the 350 mark. We've had lots of good pieces of work in the fostering arena. We're working closely with Foster Wales to enhance our current fostering offer, and we are again enhancing our residential provision. There's been positive youth justice performance in several areas, and also I'm pleased to say stronger partnership working across the council, both with our education colleagues and also our housing colleagues. So overall, I would say that, again, lots of progress, however, significant pressures continue.
Thank you. We're going to open up the report now to the committee. Do we have any questions? Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thank you as always for the good work that the team does. It is greatly appreciated, and obviously what you do. I suppose from what was partially noted, Natalie, by yourself there, with the pressures on children's services, it's a risk score of 25 and has been for a little while there, and I think since 2022 from looking back at records. Just looking, is there anything else that can be done in relation to that, but also looking at anything within the workforce like retention, caseload work, anything else like that there to make sure that we are doing the best that we can, but is there anything else that is required maybe to even look at reducing that risk potentially on an internal basis?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councillor Marshall. Just in terms of that particular risk area, I think that is a risk, a national risk, not just a local risk. I think the challenges we have, there are a number of issues across Wales in terms of societal pressures that result in, I suppose, concerns around appropriate care provided to children, which then obviously results in increased referrals to the local authority. We work very closely with our prevention and inclusion service area in order to try and get in at an early point to support our families prior to issues being escalated really to statutory services. So we are fortunate in Newport that we have a specific service area that is focused on supporting us in doing that. Again, we're working very closely with our colleagues in the Youth Justice Service to ensure that we're targeting those children that are exposed to exploitation or at risk of exploitation, again to reduce those risks. In terms of the workforce, we have had investment. At the moment, we are performing really well in terms of staffing numbers and retention rates. So we're in actually a relatively good position, a better position than we have been in a number of years. We did have investment because we were conscious about the year-on-year data, which was suggesting an increase in referrals. We did have investment into our front door, so our safeguarding hub, in order to support our practitioners in I suppose, investigating, supporting families to remain together, and prevent concerns escalating into the safeguarding arena. Just thinking in terms of, does that answer your question, Councillor Marshall?
Mostly, Natalie. Just the last part about risk, I suppose. Is there any ability to see whether or not we can mitigate the risk further to reduce it from 25 down to a further number? Before I ask the next question. Thank you.
Perhaps I can come in there, Councillor Marshall. I think, you know, it's a very valid question, and I think that's something that we're looking to focus on. So the eliminate agenda, which is the next risk down, is very closely linked to that risk above. So it's about the financial risk in relation to delivery of services, because obviously children's placements, external children's placements, are very costly. I think that what we are looking to do is to work very much more with our preventative services, not just within our prevention and inclusion service, but also how we work closely with Barnardo's that we've got a contract with. So we are continuing to look at that risk, but with an increase in population that we are seeing in Newport, the fastest growing population, you will have heard that multiple times, and the increase in population of our young people, unfortunately continues to contribute to that risk remaining as it is. But please be assured we are looking at ways to try and reduce that risk as we go through the year.
Thank you, Daniel. It's just more the fact if there was anything like extra funding or anything else like that would be able to allocate resources that would reduce, but that's kind of what I was seeking. But it does lead in to my next question about the eliminating profits, so eliminate as noted. So what's the current situation in relation to that? Because I know it, as you said, it is the next risk down. I think it was at 15 for mine, so it's correct, and continues to be so. What's the general market like at the moment? Because I know there was periods of time where the profit providers that were basically looking for placements from people, they were then changing their business model to say they're not for profit in Wales, but therefore in England they would be putting money back into the English company, if you will. So there's a change in dynamics. How will we look in scale of the context of the market? But I suppose also, does that have an impact on the way that we provide emergency placements? Because I know that's always been an issue that regard compared to more of the permanent residential placements that we hold. Thank you.
I'll start if that's okay, and I've no doubt that Natalie will want to jump in. I think the current market for children's residential placements currently in Wales is a very complex one. We are in the midst of a significant change, as you rightly say, due to Welsh Government policy about those providers cannot continue to operate if they are for profit. So a lot of providers are still considering their options as to whether they will remain functioning in Wales or not. So we still are waiting to see the real outcome of that. There is, as we know, there's only a small number at the moment of those providers that are going to be changing into not-for-profit. And so if that runs to its end point, then clearly there's going to be a gap in the market in relation to children's residential care. Newport is acutely aware of that, and the Children's Services Directorate have been working tirelessly for a number of years, in fact, to increase the numbers of residential homes that Newport runs. So we are doing everything we can to mitigate that potential long-term risk. So we are not dependent on the private sector, that we are able to manage and run our own residential provision for all of our children that need that in the future.
No, thank you. And is there anything just more about the emergency placement side of things as well there?
Okay, so the emergency placements, we are still using at this moment in time some for-profit providers in relation to that need. But again, we are also in the throes of increasing our own residential provision. So over the next few years, we are striving to meet that need. So again, we will be able to provide those emergency placements ourselves.
Thank you. And is there enough funding, resources and support given to you currently, or is that something that's noted that is basically needed in order to meet that challenge within the next scope?
So we did, there has been significant pressures on the Children's Services budget, which has been fed up into the exec board and the political arena. And as a result of that happening, the Children's Services budget did have an uplift for 26-27 of £3 million. So their core budget has been uplifted to that degree. And there are still budget pressures, I think, even with that uplift within Children's Services, but we are hoping that the work that is being undertaken will in time mitigate those pressures.
That's great. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Councillor Reynolds.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Marshall's actually asked some of my questions for me, but I'll just quickly sort of pick through a couple of others. Early on in the report, I mean, first of all, can I just say what a positive report it is? That needs to be said first of all. But two of the priorities mentioned earlier on are safely reducing the number of children in care, which has obvious benefits. The key word there is safely, isn't it? So I was just wondering whether you could maybe give a little bit more detail about exactly how that's being done to ensure the safety of the children in question. And sort of linked to that, there's also a target to increase the number of local placements, which again is obviously very desirable, but not necessarily practical or safe depending on the circumstances of the particular child that you're looking at. So it's more sort of a details question really about how those aims are progressing and how they're being achieved in practice.
I'll start, Councillor Reynolds. So in terms of safely reducing the numbers of children in care, again we work very closely with our partnership arrangement with Barnardo's in terms of supporting families in terms of children returning home to their care. We put packages in, we review children's care plans, because the risks that may be prevalent when a child is 5 may not be prevalent when a child is 12, 13. So it's always reviewing children's care plans and determine what is in their best interests, considering the risks and so on. What we also do is we work very hard when children come into statutory services to prevent them going in care as well. So it's one in terms of preventing children coming into care with that rapid response, that wraparound support for families. But it's also about, at the other end, ensuring that the children can safely return home. So that continued work with families, but always with an eye on, kind of managing that risk. Because what we know ultimately is that, children do want to return home to their families. So we continuously support that where appropriate. The second question was in relation to the
local placements.
Yes, so what we're striving to do in Newport, taking your point that, you know, it can be challenging to match children together, is look at a varied portfolio of accommodation for our children. So we are developing some 2-bedded properties as children's homes for 1 or 2 children. We're looking at, you know, whether they just be on the outskirts of Newport for a period of time, so for those children that we are at risk of exploitation, maybe best suited for a period of time just on the outskirts of Newport. We are developing further 4-bedded accommodation for children. So there's a variety of different accommodation types for children. We also are proud to say that, you know, 90.3% of our children in foster care are actually placed in-house with in-house foster carers as well. So we're not overly reliant on independent fostering agencies. And we're very much engaged in kind of that recruitment activity to enhance our fostering offer to children.
Thanks for that, Danny. I mean, I think we had a very sort of similar discussion earlier on with education and exclusion figures, and it's the preventative work, isn't it, that's so key sometimes in these instances. Please excuse if there's some noise coming through the microphone. The recyclers have just arrived outside. It's really noisy, so I do apologise. I was going to ask some questions about the Eliminate agenda as well. I think Councillor Marshall's covered most of those, to be honest. But just in more sort of general terms with the Eliminate agenda, I know this isn't a political forum, and I'll try and make sure this question isn't sort of political in any way. But obviously with the change of government in the Senedd now, are you anticipating or have you seen any changes in approach in terms of the Eliminate agenda? Do you foresee any challenges, or are things just carrying on as they were before?
Absolutely, we haven't seen any indication that things will be changing. It's set now in terms of legislation, and you know, we're striving forward really in terms of that 2030 deadline. I think that Newport is in a good position, and in terms of delivering on that at this stage. And you know, principally, even if that agenda, even if it wasn't set in kind of legislation, you know, I think that we would all agree that, you know, it's the right thing to do, and
absolutely
be paying excessive costs for children's care and actually delivering in-house provision. You know, we're confident that we can provide really good care for our children.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, no, that's reassuring to hear that. That's really good. Can I just ask one more question as well, please, Chair? It's to do with later on in the report. There's the item about housing and accommodation programmes for post-16s. There is a statement there that says, and I'll just read this word for word, POBL provision is progressing. However, a potential delay is due to come online in November, December 2026. I just wondered whether you're able to say a little bit more about what that delay might be and how long that delay might be.
Yeah, so in terms of those accommodation options, so the properties are available to us, and we are just going through the tendering process now. Actually, there's a meeting today, hence why Jay isn't here, with some providers. We're hoping to go live around October with those programmes. Like I said, just in terms of our 16 plus, we've developed a 16 plus accommodation framework now, because what we recognise is that we need to offer our young people a range of different accommodation types, some supported accommodation, some children may respond better in supported lodging, some when I'm ready arrangements. So what we're looking to do is just kind of ensure that we're meeting children's needs, and children aren't just you know, having to be accommodated in the options that are available to us. So we're basically ensuring that we've got enough different types, varied accommodation to meet the needs of our children.
That's great, thanks. I mean, that is one issue that's sort of quite close to my heart, because it's been a little hobby horse of mine for a few years now, because we're working in the sector, and things aren't as bad as they used to be. I mean, there was a point where people would reach 16 and almost like just fall off a cliff. It's not as bad as that now. Things are definitely improving, but it is still an issue. So that's why I wanted to just clarify that. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, you'd be glad to hear that most of my questions have been rolled out, you know. I still have a few, but don't worry. The underfunded remand nights, can we talk about that? The remand nights. I know that I believe you get grant covering 83 nights a month. However, the service has incurred 512 nights, causing 192k overspend. How are we going to recruit that money? How are we going to make the Home Office, make the government, and I don't care whether it's funded or not, they're the first owners, I guess. How are we going to make the Home Office budget right? I mean, there must be a mechanism for us to get money back. Or I'm being totally stupid.
Not at all, Chair. It is not at all. It is a quite complicated area, and I'll start again because I've actually taken over chairing reports Youth Justice Board.
Right.
So I've got a reasonable knowledge in this area. So you're actually right. Last year's budget wasn't enough to meet the demand. Again, I can report that that was reported up through the executive board and politically, and that budget line has been uplifted by 200,000 for this year. So supporting us with that budget pressure, we're reporting today a small underspend on that budget line. So where we are coming within the budget, but you're absolutely right to point out that there is a pot of money that comes forward from the Home Office to support with the remand bed costs, and it wasn't sufficient to meet those demands for last year in relation to that. I think the challenge we have is that when a child is remanded, and Natalie will correct me if I'm wrong in saying this, if a child is remanded into custody, they also then become a child looked after. So they have a dual status, so they automatically become looked after by the local authority, and therefore then we are financially liable to meet their needs. So the Home Office and some of the responsibilities will fall to the local authority as well as the Home Office. But as the chair of the Newport Youth Offending Service, we are in dialogue with the Youth Justice Board and therefore through to the Home Office about is there a way that this formula can be reviewed and looked at, because it hasn't been enough. We're hoping in the future that we won't have children remanded into custody, but that is quite very difficult to predict. We are trying to have that conversation with the Home Office to get those budgets increased.
Yeah, it's a massive burden. I guess I understand the relationship between remand and looked after children. But before once they're remanded, the mechanism hasn't kicked in. Hasn't really kicked in for them to become looked after.
So the day they go into remand is the day they start becoming looked after.
The paperwork is signed.
Yes, so they
So
are
signed at the
they
same
become,
time.
yeah, exactly the same time. that they therefore then placing a number of statutory responsibilities onto the local authority.
Can you keep us updated on any progress for this? It's awfully unfair, I guess, but there we go. I think you've answered, but you may want to talk about the net overspend of nearly 2 million. I mean, it's made up of various out-of-area placements, residential, post-16 accommodation, accommodation overspend. There seems to be quite a bit in there. I just want to have a greater understanding, because if we're going that high, is that a trend that we're always going to be that high? And then we have to ensure that budget setting going forward reflects the possible demand of the services space.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that's what you've just described there about, you know, looking at your budgets and trying to predict demand. That work was done at the end of the last financial year, and as I said, a report was put up to the executive board, which did lead to an increase within the children's services core budget. The challenge is that, you know, working with people is very unpredictable. So we're working hard to meet the demand. What you heard the team talk about in relation to the eliminate agenda and increasing our in-house children's residential care placements is one of the things that we are doing to meet that demand and to mitigate future budget pressures. So, but these things take time to get into train, you know, and just to see the end of it. So now,
in addition, Councillor Routley, you made reference to the 16 plus accommodation overspend. Some of the things that we're doing now is actually to, you know, reduce our costs for that 16 plus by bringing new providers online to support us. Last year we were looking at 1.5 budget pressure. We said we will mitigate that, and currently we're forecasting a small underspend in that area because we have developed a framework, we've got some new accommodation, and so there's various different strategies that we're putting in place in order to mitigate that. But just to echo what, you know, Tanya said, the challenge will be is at the moment, whilst we're still using private providers who dictate the cost of provision, because they can, we're always going to be in a difficult financial position. But with our current plan in terms of, you know, developing our own accommodation for children, we should see that cost coming down.
Will we see an improvement then in the next quarter or the next end of year review? Will that improvement, as Councillor Marshall identified, overall for the last 4 quarters, we've been at 25% severe, and that's worrying. It's worrying for you guys. It's worrying for the authority. Understand, eliminate sits just below that at 15%, and hopefully that's going to lessen. Will we see a better improvement in overspends and underspends in the next end of year review, or even in the next quarterly review?
I think all we can say at this point is that the team are working really hard to mitigate against those budget overspends. One of the things that we put in place, in fact we had one this week, is we have a regular budget, as well as all of the budget monitoring that occurs. We have an additional meeting where we look at each line, overspend, underspend, and look at the mitigating actions and check that those actions are being undertaken. to say that, and I think the point that I made earlier about it takes time for us to increase our residential provision, so we have to identify the right property, we have to go through a purchasing process for that property. There then needs to be work done on that property to make sure it's compliant with the CIW regulations. That whole process can take at least 12 months, just that process in itself. So, and we've got a number of those projects that are, either at the beginning or the middle or the end of the, and so to say that we will, I think the only issue is we're doing everything we can to mitigate against budget pressures.
Okay.
And it's unpredictable dealing with people who have children that, that we haven't known previously that, come in and sadly have to be accommodated.
Okay, so get your magic wand out and tell me, how can we speed the process up?
Of getting the homes up and running.
Right. So instead of 12 months, how can you reduce it to 6 months?
Well,
in your opinion?
Well, I think Louise is, this is her area of expertise, and she leads on this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll ask Louise, although I'm not convinced that we're going to be able to slim that timeline down further if we want to get the provision right, because we must make sure that the accommodation we have meets the needs of our most complex children. So the works that we need to do to make sure that we've got the right grounds, the interior is correct and robust.
Grant funding is obtainable by council. It's multifaceted, that is the challenge.
Do you want to
just say because in relation to a question that was raised earlier about the estate and portfolio as well, we're very mindful that whilst we've got the opportunity for full refurbishments, we do everything we can to make sure that these homes at this point in time will last us. So we've got a strategy now, asset management strategy, and we've got money put aside because, as our homes get older, as I think education pointed out, there are going to be quite large projects that we need to maintain those homes. So we don't want to skim on any of that with any new properties as well. So we've got, I think we're more efficient. I think the more that we have, the quicker the processes that we've got in place and we've kept on. But like I say, we don't want to hurry them at the detriment then of missing something that costs us down the line.
And we're also future-proofing them from an environmental point of view, so all of our new homes have heat pumps and solar panels to make them more efficient into the future.
We're pushing as quickly as we.
It sounds like you're prepared, but processes always need to be looked at, always need to be challenged, always need to be pushed. Because otherwise you get into a rut and you just accept this 12 months. No, you're probably ready now. You know your clients. You know who's going to go into that house, more or less, in the air, because you've prepared for them. You've started the conversation. But the process is too long. The process, 12 months is probably an aspirational point, I'd say. So. Yeah, I would be working on that. Anyway, that's my opinion. And, I feel your frustration because I understand. I don't see any other hands up, and I'm taking from that we are satisfied with or content at least with the end of year report. There's no more questions. So. Thank you very much for answering the questions and presenting this morning to us. We're going to move on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, if it's all right, I'll just go very quickly through the recommendations I've captured.
Yes.
With the education end of year review, I haven't got any specific actions or recommendations, only that committee are content with the report.
Yes.
Is there anything you would like to add, or are we happy for that to stay as is?
Anybody got anything to add?
No, thank you.
Yeah, happy with that, Chair.
And with the children's services, I've obviously got to share your recommendation about updated on any progress with the Home Office funding.
Yes.
But aside from that, content with the report.
Okay.
Chair, nothing from me, thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Do you want me to jump straight into the next item?
Yeah.
Perfect. So, no changes with work programme. The date of our next meeting is the 8th of September. We will be looking at the youth service strategy and the Director of Social Services annual report. In relation to our actions now, have you had any updates aside from the direct payments action being complete? It was complete after I published, so obviously it's not reflected in things, but it will be in our next agenda. And that's all from me, Chair, unless there's any questions anyone have.
Any questions?
All content.
No, all good, thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, well, that concludes the meeting for today. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for your scrutinising of the end of year reports, and have a good day. Thank you all. Bye bye.